It's okay to want an abortion. Did you know 1 in 4 people who can get pregnant will have one? So it's actually more common than most people think. At CareFM, you can choose what type of abortion care works best for you. We have in-person locations with private entrances in Atlanta, Chicago, and the Washington, D.C. areas. And we also offer medically supported abortion pills by mail in 20 states. For some people, it's more comforting to come into a private office where they can sit with one of our medical providers and either leave no longer pregnant or with abortion pills in hand. For others, they prefer to get abortion pills through the mail so they can decide the best time and place to complete the process. Getting abortion pills by mail from CareFM is simple. Fill out an online form, and a licensed provider will review your medical history. And if eligible, your medication will be shipped to you in a couple of days. Kara, our text-based abortion companion, will guide you through the process from start to finish with instructions, reminders, and answers to all your questions whenever they come up 24/7. With either choice, please know CareFM will support you every step of the way. Learn more at carefm.org.
In Walmart's Who Newville, joy started to grow. For online-only savings sure to steal the show. Tech treats and toys so dazzling and new. Walmart Cyber Monday deal soon ready for you. It's online only with very little time to spare. December 1st will soon be here, so be sure to be there. The Who's are prepared. Are you ready too? A day packed with savings. Amazing! Who knew? Subject to availability, terms and fees apply.
Get your mother-loving ears on because your big-time radio DJ's got news. PayPal lets you choose how you want to pay for all the stuff. With PayPal, I can pay in-store, pay online, or pay over time. What's that? You want this translated into song? I hope you're sitting down. You can pay your own way. You keep those ears on, you hear? Don't just pay, baby. PayPal.
Learn more at paypal.com.
We think of democracies as peace-loving, aristocracies as war-loving. There is truth to that, but we're talking about middle-class democracies. And we're talking about a world of expanding commerce and expanding technology. Ancient democracies are warlike because the only way to increase your part of the pie is not to grow the pie because it doesn't grow much. It's to get a bigger piece. And the only way you get a bigger piece is you take it from somebody else.
Hello. In a continuation of Saturday's discussion with Paul Rahe, we delve into the Peloponnesian War after the Sicilian Expedition, as the Spartans take Persian gold to subdue their democratic rivals Athens. The war continues for a further 9 years as the Athenians rise again after their Sicilian disaster, before ending in crushing defeat in 404 BC. Paul then goes on to talk about current events and the importance of honour to states today, and of history to the health of society. Please do share the podcast with the like-minded. As ever, you can get in touch through Spotify comments or email history@aspectsofhistory.com. I have plenty of great history on the way, including the Vietnam War, the Duchess of Windsor, the Wars of the Roses, the Nazi Mind, and the Nazis and the German royal family. So please do subscribe, follow, and share. But in the meantime, it's me talking with Paul Rahe on Athens, Sparta, and honour. Paul, following on from the first half of our chat, if we go back to ancient Greece and the two city-states, Sparta and Athens, can you just remind me, I'm sure the listeners already know, but just remind me where we are, the differences between the two states?
The Spartans want to be left alone. They're a saturated power. It's a phrase Bismarck used. They've got everything they need. They are all gentlemen. They rule over a servile population that outnumbers them maybe 7-1. They need defense, and they're always thinking in terms of defense, and that's why they have formed the Peloponnesian League, to enable them to keep what they have. The Athenians want more and more and more. This is driven partly by Marathon and Salamis and Mycale and Eurymedon and Cypriot Cyprus, where they had great victories.
Do you
So
think part
war-
is there any where does democracy play as a motivating factor here? In that Sparta is not really democratic,
well,
whereas
we think, and with some reason, aristocracy means a taste for war, because the European aristocracy did have a taste for war. The Spartan aristocracy, and all of the Spartans are aristocrats in some sense of the word, they prepare for war, but they do not want war because of the threat to what they have. Athens is a democracy, which means the ruling class is poor people. And what do they want? They want what they don't have. And in antiquity, how do you expand your property? You take it from somebody else. And one way of doing it is capturing people and selling them as slaves. So there is a slave trade. It's very important. Another is having subject allies who pay a contribution. That's what the word meant initially, but the word comes to mean tribute. So the poor of Athens are not really poor, only because there's an income stream. And therefore, it's expansionist. We think of democracies as peace-loving, aristocracies as war-loving. There is truth to that, but we're talking about middle-class democracies. And we're talking about a world of expanding commerce and expanding technology. Ancient democracies are warlike, because the only way to increase your part of the pie is not to grow the pie, because it doesn't grow much. It's to get a bigger piece. And the only way you get a bigger piece is you take it from somebody else.
So how should I think about, you mentioned Pan-Hellenism at the start. How does one think about the conflict between Athens and Sparta if one were to view it as also a civil war, in that
it is a civil war and it is not a civil war? I mean, if you look at Plato, I think it's in the Laws, maybe it's in the Republic, I've forgotten. He treats it as a kind of internecine war. And it is an internecine war. These people have not exactly the same gods, because every city has its own gods, but they share certain festivals, the Olympic festival, Delphi. They speak different dialects of a common language. They can understand one another. They have a sense of belonging together because of Homer and Hesiod. They have a sense of not belonging to one another because each city has its own civic religion. Each city has its own dialect. It has its own traditions. And they don't naturalize people much, which means there aren't immigrants in the crucial sense of the word. They don't become citizens. So these are closed corporations, if you will. So it's kind of in between a civil war and a war between separate polities. And the experience of resisting the Persians, and there were, by the way, more Greeks on the side of the Persians than were resisting the Persians, because they'd gotten control of all sorts of Greeks, and there were Greeks who allied with them because they thought they might gain some advantage from it. The memory of fighting the Persians reinforces this sense of pan-Hellenic unity. But does it reinforce it enough to prevent war? Sort of, because the Spartans are ambivalent down to the Battle of Mantinea and the earlier seizure of Coryphosium. So it's a little bit complicated. Look, you think of Europe. There's a common culture. The Europeans, they're Protestants and Catholics, but the Europeans are nearly all Christians. They have an enormous amount in common. They have a kind of Latin background, a kind of classical memory in common. But they fought one another. They really fought one another in a self-destructive way. Europe isn't as important as it once was. And World War I, in a way, is the moment when, think of the wastage of resources, of manpower, and also of spirit in World War I. And Europe has been in decline since 1914, largely because of what you might call a civil war. It isn't, and it is, if you know what I'm trying to say.
I
That's
do.
kind of like the Greek situation.
Just on the honor point as well, again, Persia's the great bogeyman throughout this century, and indeed into the next century. And of course, it's the Alexander's Great Crusade, if that's not the right word to use, which it probably isn't, but against the Persians.
Well, it kind of is a crusade.
Yeah.
It's revenge. I mean, it's presented as revenge. Now, obviously, there's greed involved, love of power, love of glory, and so forth. But there is a sense that they invaded us and now it's our turn.
Well, exactly. So the Persians are the great bogeyman. So where does honor fit with Sparta taking Persian gold to fund their fight
There's
against
no
them?
honor in it at all. And it's done out of a sense of necessity because Athens has become an existential threat, and there's deep reluctance. So if you look at the third Attic, what I call the third Attic War, the relations between the officials sent out from Sparta and the Persian satrap Tissaphernes are very uneasy because the Persians want something in return for.
There's no such thing as a free lunch, is there?
No, and the minimum of what they want are the Greek cities along the coast, Miletus and Ephesus and Cumae and Halicarnassus and so forth. They want those back. Initially, they try to claim everything that they'd ever controlled, and the Spartans eventually recoil from this. So the Spartans are having to eat crow to do this. They go to war in 431, claiming they're going to war for the freedom of the Greeks against the Athenians who enslaved the Greeks. And to actually enslave Greeks along the Asia Minor coast to the Persians, which is what they are doing, is very hard for them to swallow. So to give you an example of this, the figure at Sparta who eventually defeats the Athenians at the Battle of Aegospotami is Lysander. He is sent out as Novarch in 407, and he works a deal with the second son of the Persian king, Cyrus, the younger Cyrus, who's 16 years old at the time, where he gets enough money that he can pay his rowers more than the Athenians can afford to pay. And people start deserting from the Athenians to the Peloponnesians as a consequence of this. Most of the rowers aren't Athenians; they're riffraff from around the Aegean who need to find a way to live and need a livelihood. He only is there for a year, which has to do with Spartan rules. He goes back home, another man replaces him. That other man wants peace with Athens, and he despises the Persians. And the Persians make him crawl for money, and he won't crawl. And he sets out to defeat the Athenians, wanting then to make a peace that doesn't involve the destruction of Athens. So there's a Panhellenic impulse still at Sparta. There are people who don't want this war who don't like the alliance with Persia and who want to go back to the earlier world, perhaps with an Athens that is powerful, but not as powerful, so powerful as to be a threat to the Spartans. He dies at the Battle of Arginusae. Lysander comes back out, finishes the job, and then they discuss destroying Athens altogether. And they have to be talked out of that. And the sort of trump card in terms of talking them out of that is the danger posed by the Boeotians, by Thebes. You need Athens to counter Thebes. And this leads to the total alienation of Thebes from Sparta, which takes place in the period, the decade after the end of the what is now called the Peloponnesian War. So there's no honor in it at all. So what are the Spartans motivated by? Fear.
At Carafem, you can choose the abortion care that works best for you. With in-person visits in Atlanta, Chicago, and the D.C. area, or medically supported abortion pills by mail in 20 states. Some people feel more comfortable meeting with a provider in person and leaving either no longer pregnant or with pills in hand. Others prefer getting abortion pills by mail. Just fill out a short online form, and if eligible, your medication arrives in a few days in a plain package. When you choose abortion pills, Cara, our text-based abortion companion, is with you every step of the way, offering 24/7 support and answers whenever you need them. However you get care, Carafem will support you every step of the way. Learn more at carafem.org.
But I don't understand that, I have to say, because, and the reason why I don't is because for the first time after studying my degree, I went to Sparta. So I traveled through a very, I think there's a bit more of a motorway now, but when I first went, there was a quite a slender road winding its way through mountains to get in.
I know that road well.
Right, exactly, I'm sure. And then you've got, the Taygetus mountains surrounding you. It is of course, they famously said they didn't need city walls, or they didn't have city walls. Well, they didn't need them because they had the topography to protect them.
It helped them a lot.
Trying to imagine an Athenian army defeating a Spartan army in that around that terrain seems to me impossible.
No, the Thebans do it. They win a victory at Leuctra in Boeotia, and that victory is enough that they can take an army into the Peloponnesus, organize the Arcadians, Mantinea, Tegea, and the other cities there, and invade Laconia. They go all the way to Sparta. They free the Messenians. They build Megalopolis, creating an Arcadian federation. They build a city at Messene. The ruins are really quite impressive of these two places because they were very well built, and you can go see them. I've spent a lot of time in the Peloponnesus, partly wandering around looking at things. But Patrick Lee Fermer was a good friend of mine.
Was he?
I met him in the course of my wanderings, and we hit it off. And I spent 2 years living in Istanbul as a fellow of an outfit called the Institute of Current World Affairs. And I would go visit Patty and Joan every 2 or 3 months and spend a week with them down in Kardamyle, which is really on Mani, but it's Mount Taygetus. It's it's where it comes down to the sea at the Messenian Gulf. So I was down there a whole lot, and I have not walked over the mountain the way he did. I'm about to be 76, so it's not going to happen. But I have driven over that mountain many times, and I have done a lot of hiking in that area. But you can come down from the north through the hill country from Arcadia. It's rough country, and it's defensible. The Spartans could have defended it, but once they lose a big battle, it's over for them. So, and the Battle of there are 2 battles of Mantinea. There's one in 418. There's another in 362 when the Spartans try to make a comeback. So it's a place where battles take place because it's strategically important to the Spartans, and they are they're acutely aware of their vulnerability. So they are driven to go after Athens by fear. There are some Spartans who are thinking of glory, of course. They're not immune to such thoughts. And there are some Spartans who are thinking of advantage, booty, and so forth. But the thing that tips the balance at Sparta is fear. Whereas the Athenians, once they've defeated the Persians over and over again, they don't fear anymore. It's honor and advantage. And honor is almost too tame a word to describe what they're aiming at. And you'd think after Sicily, they'd be finished. But they managed to keep going for another 9 years. And it's this astonishing drive they have. And they could have won in those years. The Spartans twice are forced is a little too strong. After defeats, the Spartans twice offer peace. And the terms they offer it on is everybody keeps what they've got. We withdraw from Decilia and Attica. You withdraw from Coryphasium and Cythera. And otherwise, everyone keeps what they got.
Good terms.
Yes, especially the second time, because at that point, the Athenians control the Hellespont, the Sea of Marmara, and the Bosporus, which is the route. It's a kind of umbilical cord to the Black Sea from which they import grain. Very good terms, but the Athenians won't take it. Nothing less than total victory, and that's what destroys them. Had they been less madly honorific in their orientation and more cunning, they would have accepted the peace, and the Spartans would not have wanted to maintain forces out in the Aegean. They've gone back home. Just wait. All you have to do is be patient. They will withdraw. Without Persian money, they don't have the wherewithal to support a great fleet. They don't like being out in that larger world. And you just wait, and everything falls back into your hands. But they can't do that. The realists can't explain this. The Wilsonian idealists can't explain anything in antiquity. But if you pay attention to the culture, and the culture is shaped by history, you can see why they turn it down. It would be a shame not to have everything back. It would be shameful. It would be a disgrace. Can't have that. So it's a wonderful period to study.
It certainly is. Hello, Ollie here. Please forgive my interruption, but I wanted to let you know that at Aspects of History, we produce a digital magazine featuring articles, interviews, short stories and book reviews of the best historical writing available. Authors featured including Ben Macintyre, Lucy Worsley, Andrew Roberts and plenty more. An annual subscription is available for only $9.99, that's pounds or dollars. Yep, you heard that right. That's 6 issues for under £10 or dollars. Head over to aspectsofhistory.com to subscribe, where you can also gift subscriptions. Now back to the show.
But part of what I wrote these books for was to influence defense intellectuals. At least in the war colleges in the United States, what they teach is built on Thucydides. That's the starting point. I used to lecture at the Air War College. I did 2 stints of that. And I was told on Sunday by someone who is at the Army War College that my books are the basis of how they read the Peloponnesian War, which I'm very glad to hear. I did not know that. And that it was true at the Naval War College too. Now, maybe that's true, maybe it's not, but I certainly like it to be true. Because I want people who are dealing with foreign policy in the United States and elsewhere to think in terms not only of fear and advantage, but of honor in interpreting what other polities are apt to do, both allies and rivals, and to be self-aware about the role played by honor in one's own society. This Wilsonian idealism that has the American elite in its grip is a kind of honor. It's a justification for American imperialism. We will bring peace to the world. This was what Wilson thought he was doing. This is what FDR thought he was doing with the United Nations. And it's what the older Bush and Bill Clinton thought they were doing. So it's the American version of honor. We're not driven by fear. We're not driven by advantage. We're driven by honor. Well, to some degree, that's true. And it can lead you into foolishness. Look, think what the Russians have done to themselves by going into Ukraine. It absolutely mad. And it has cost them so many men that they're importing North Koreans, which is an astonishing development.
But my concern, Paul, is that we have a political class, certainly in this country, speaking in this country, where the kind of study of history or the knowledge of history or grand strategy, as it were, is not something that many even bother to look into. But it just feels like the political class is just not interested in looking at the past for lessons for today in the right areas. They all seem to study PPE and then become, work as advisors and SPADs and all this kind of stuff. And
rather than modern history at Oxford, yes.
Yeah.
By the way, my daughter got a Rhodes Scholarship on Saturday.
Oh, congratulations! That's wonderful.
So she will be following in my footsteps and going.
Oh, that's wonderful. Well, she's definitely got quite an advantage above her other
and her area of interest is South Asia, which is a very British thing to be interested in.
Yes, absolutely.
A wonderful thing.
Yes. But I mean, where do you think we've obviously blundered in the last sort of 20, 30 years you've mentioned with Russia as an example? I mean, how do we turn this around?
Well, the way it turns around is painful experience. People in Europe have had to rethink. I was in Germany at the American Academy in Berlin in 2006. And I can remember having a conversation with someone from the Christian Democratic Union who was involved in foreign policy. And I asked him, could you imagine Germany ever supporting the United States intervening to prevent the Iranians from getting nuclear weapons? And he said, never. Well, I don't think he would say never today. And we attempted to persuade the Germans not to take Russian natural gas. And we got absolutely nowhere. And the Russian view was, we give them natural gas, we can tell them, we can defang them. They will, and the Germans have paid a terrible price for this because they became dependent on cheap energy. And now their economy is the worst economy in all of Europe. Who would have ever thought the German economy would be the worst economy in all of Europe? But it's because of that decision. So I'm afraid pain is what causes people to go back and rethink. I'll give you another example of this. When the Russians went into Ukraine, Japan doubled its military budget. Now, Japan is not in Europe, and the Russians really aren't a threat to Japan. Why did they double their military budget? Because they thought, oh my God, war is a possibility again. And there is a sense in which the Germans and others, especially on the continent of Europe, have for some time thought there will never be another major war. Uh, well, there's a price for that. There's a kind of blindness, and that you really get hurt. And then you begin to think, oh gosh, we need to pay some attention to grand strategy. Look, in America, it's similar. It's not the case that our defense intellectuals are completely ignorant of these things. They can't be, just because of our hegemony, of our position in the world. So the kind of people in Washington, they know some history. And the war colleges teach the history of strategy. So there's some knowledge. But if you look at American universities and you ask the following question, where would I go to study military history? The answer is certainly not Harvard. No longer Yale. They had a grand strategy program, but it's been taken apart. They put a nurse in charge of it for a while. Princeton? No. Cornell? I'm sorry. Where? Stanford? Give me a break. Ohio State in the past, and still today, but they're shutting down their graduate program in that field. So about the only place that is adding military historians is Hillsdale College, where I teach. And we now have 4, and I'm hoping we have a 5th, and I'm hoping we have a PhD in it. I probably won't be around for this because, as I said, I'll be 76 in a few weeks. And surely there is an end that does come to one's career. But there is turning one's gaze away from political realities. This is true the American Academy generally. And especially war, but used to be nice people didn't study war, so we'll have a diplomatic historian. Now there are no diplomatic historians. And one of the things I've noticed is the decline in the number of political historians, people who do American political history. It's a very interesting history.
Yes.
British constitutional history used to be something that every history department of any respect had. I can't think of a place that has a British constitutional historian now. Maybe University of Chicago. Maybe Yale still does, although I think she retired. So there's a kind of turning away from those areas in life where people make political decisions that have consequences and not studying those decisions. 20 years ago, I was a visiting professor at Yale, and I taught a new course. It's called the American Revolution. It had not been taught, except by a visitor, since Edmund Morgan had retired, which had been 20 years before I showed up to teach this course. And there was no course on the American Civil War, no course on the Great Depression. All the courses on America were taught by people from American studies, so it was all cultural history. Or ethnic history. Asian and Pacific Islanders in the United States, 2-term sequence. The consequence of all this is a rapid decline in history majors. And this is true everywhere. In the Midwest, where I live, if you go below the level of University of Michigan, University of Wisconsin, to the lesser schools, the number of people teaching history has dropped by anywhere from 1/3 to 1/2. The lines have been swallowed. They weren't getting any students. Well, they weren't getting any students because they weren't teaching things that students are drawn to, which is politics, diplomacy, war. Now, I don't think Oxford's as bad as that. I mean, I was at All Souls in 2005. Hugh Strawn was there as the professor of military history. He's a very fine historian. I don't know who's there now, but I'm sure they have someone good.
There's definitely an appetite for it, for all these major subjects in history, as we've seen, even in the sort of vast success of The Rest is History, which covers American politics and is just doing a series on Nelson. Now, this is just a podcast, but that gets millions and millions and millions of people interested.
Sure. No, absolutely. And look, military history books in the United States sell. I wish mine sold as well as some of them, but anyway, what can you do?
This has been absolutely fantastic, Paul. I really appreciate your time. I'm going to put links in the show notes for listeners, and I'm now going to get the entire series, because I think also very important to get the kind of the Peloponnesian War. Forgive me for calling it that again. From the Spartan perspective.
Well, that's the point.
Yeah.
That, and to throw light on the importance of regime difference, cultural difference, how honor is understood. Well, this has been a great pleasure. Thank you for having me on.
Thank you. Thank you for listening. I do hope you haven't minded the two-parters recently, but it's down to some long chats I've had with some fascinating historians. So splitting them up seemed kinder on you, dear listeners. Please do share with friends, like, subscribe, and follow. And by all means, get in touch via Spotify comments or email history@aspectsofhistory.com. But until then, thank you and good night.
The holidays mean more travel, more shopping, more time online, and more personal info in more places that could expose you more to identity theft. But LifeLock monitors millions of data points per second. If your identity is stolen, our US-based restoration specialists will fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Don't face drained accounts, fraudulent loans, or financial losses alone. Get more holiday fun and less holiday worry with LifeLock. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit LifeLock.com/podcast. Terms apply.